under the rain red with fresh blood. The henchman helplessly tried to persuade him, saying if he didn't deal with that child now, he would regret it later. But the senior didn't think so and believed this was the right decision. Long ago, there were extremely violent demons who spread terror among humans. They mercilessly slaughtered people and destroyed everything in their path. But then a hero set foot on the Demon Gate Island and eliminated countless demons, which also marked the beginning of the war between the two sides. Fast forward to the present, Shiki calls his friend to tell him that he was expelled from school. After chatting casually, the young man tossed his phone aside, completely disregarding the expulsion. Unexpectedly, the old man burst into his room, knocked hard, and demanded his good-for-nothing son explain why he was expelled. Already irritated, Shiki responded defiantly, "And what about all these guns piled up in the room? Your family runs a liquor business, not a weapons shop." The protagonist scratched his head and asked if the old man had lost another order. "What kind of adult are you being so pathetic? At least I'm better than someone who got expelled from school." Finding this unbearable, Shiki bluntly declared, "I absolutely will not become someone like you. Not sharing blood with you is truly a blessing." Hearing this, the foster father could only sigh and turn away. Although Shiki always spoke bitter words, the old man never blamed this foolish son of his. While the old man was out delivering beer, the young man took out his pistol to try it. But before he could pull the trigger, a sudden explosion startled him. Shiki curiously looked down to see what it was and got attacked by something black. Next, it charged straight into the house, gripped his legs, and pulled him down from the first floor. Through the smoke emerged an elegant old man who approached asking, "Are you Shiki?" But then got hit by a car. Following his father's words, he hurriedly got in the car and left before the situation worsened. While driving, the son continuously questioned if he had borrowed money from loan sharks. Given the circumstances, the old man had to reveal the truth that Shiki carried the blood of the red demon within him, and that man from earlier possessed the blood of heroes. It might sound hard to believe, but that was the truth. While they were talking, they were again attacked by that same man. Soon, the car was covered by something black and broke down. With no other choice, both of them pulled over at a nearby warehouse to escape. The father anxiously ran out calling for Shiki to leave immediately, just as the car exploded. The moment he took his eyes off his son, the young man was dragged into the warehouse by that black substance, forcing the old man to run in to save him. While being tied up and unable to move, the scarred man approached, saying that those carrying demon blood like him were parasites to humanity. Therefore, the mission of their organization was to find and eliminate such maggots. The old man stepped in saying the Peach Boy fairy tale was real. The age-old war between heroes and demons had started thousands of years ago and continued through generations. The heroes formed an organization, while demons, out of fear, began to blend in among humans to survive. Seeing the scarred man coming to attack, the old man immediately created a large sword to block the blow. After a struggle, he pushed back and explained that this black bone was a special form that only heroes possessed. The white-haired man said, "It's been a while since we met. We're both getting old, aren't we?" The old man angrily shouted, "Don't mention that anymore." As for Shiki, he was utterly shocked to learn that his father was a former member of the hero organization. Scarface didn't care because he was there to deal with the father and son. Unfortunately, the old man was also the type who loved a good fight, saying, "If you want to fight, let's see." With those words, he raised his sword and jumped forward to duel with his former comrade. Watching the two old men fighting with swords, Shiki stood dumbfounded, not understanding what was happening. The former comrade couldn't help but wonder why his brother was protecting monsters that only harm humans. The old man angrily told Scarface to shut his mouth and not talk so much. Just as he brought his weapon forward, the brother suddenly became eerily calm. The moment the old man jumped down to strike, his opponent had already teleported to his side and delivered a finishing blow. Helplessly, the uncle could only take the fatal wound and collapse before his son's eyes. Scarface approached and said, "You cannot defeat someone who has been training continuously all this time." When asked why he tried so hard to protect that demon, the old man grabbed his leg and shouted loudly, "Of course, because he is my precious son." Was he really willing to kill a child just because the innocent child carried demon blood? Witnessing his father about to be logged out by his opponent, Shiki's mind seemed to be controlled by extreme rage. Only by killing the man could he save his father. Blood from his body flowed out and enveloped his body, transforming Shiki into a terrifying, brutal demon. Just taking his eyes off for a moment, the old man suddenly realized that the brat had disappeared. Sensing danger standing right next to him, Scarface immediately retreated to defend against the rain of bullets. When the smoke cleared, he carefully observed the surroundings and discovered a red demon on the ceiling. It was at that moment he was certain it had awakened, which explained its frenzied state. The old man knew all too well that demons fight by controlling blood, but that wasn't the scariest part. With years of experience, Scarface, though struggling, could still fight evenly with Shiki. He even asked for some leniency and almost took its life. Seeing the demon retreat and grow a new arm, he felt utterly exasperated. The reason demons needed to be eliminated was their ferocity and loss of identity. While trying to find a way to deal with it, it had already used its own blood to create countless guns, making the old man sweat profusely. Surviving the rain of bullets was tiring enough, but now the kid had created an entire rocket. One misstep and he'd be blown to pieces instantly. Recognizing the dire situation, Scarface fled in all directions, then suddenly jumped up to deliver a slash, but it just grinned in response. Thinking Shiki would die after that blow, unexpectedly, it lunged out and kicked him flying high, not giving the old man a chance to retaliate. The demon stepped on his face and then unleashed all its firepower to send the opponent to the other world. As a result, the warehouse turned into a scrapyard, yet somehow Scarface managed to escape death by a hair's breadth. Suddenly, the demon showed signs of losing control and continuously expelled blood outside. When there was nothing left, Shiki finally woke up with hands stained with blood. The old man, with his battered body, slowly approached and said, "Once you're logged out, there's nothing more to fear." With those words, he rushed forward to end Shiki with his blade, but failed. This was because the old man had used his remaining strength to shield him, while also asking for some blood from his former comrade. Perhaps earlier Shiki had transformed into a violent, uncontrollable demon, but to him, the boy was still a son to be proud of. After everything, he still smiled and said, "Father has been very happy." Scarface intended to finish the job, but seeing too many civilians arriving, he was forced to leave helplessly. Before closing his eyes for the last time, the old man fell, apologizing for keeping many things from him. It seemed he could no longer be by his side. The old man knocked on himself and said, "Be strong enough not to lose to either heroes or the demon blood inside you. Protect your happiness, okay?" This is a promise between two men. Shiki's blood boiled as he ordered the old man to shut up and stubbornly carried him away. Weren't there still many things they needed to talk about? So don't give up. Sensing his son's concern, the father wished demons and heroes could stand shoulder to shoulder like this. Seeing the old man fall, Shiki kept shouting, "Get up and scold me like you always do. Please answer me, even one word will do." Though painful, Shiki accepted the fact that he had gone forever with a satisfied smile. He placed him down and sat there in grief when suddenly someone standing behind him said, "It's too noticeable here." The young man just turned around, but before he could do anything, he was struck on the nape and fell unconscious. Somewhere, a group of bandaged people felt indignant because that scarred man dared to act on his own. Though bearing the name of heroes, they always acted cautiously so that ordinary people wouldn't know about the organization's existence. Because ordinary people didn't need to know about the fear of the existence of those filthy demons. They promised they would definitely wipe out all demons from this world. On the other side, the demon faction had also fostered a talented generation to counter the hero faction. Additionally, they had found another person. But this kid was very stubborn, so he was tied up completely. At this rate, if he remained stubborn, they might have to kick Shiki out of the academy. When he was little, Shiki often played in the sandbox in the park and then had his father carry him. However, that happy scene suddenly turned into a nightmare caused by Scarface himself. Awakened by eyes full of hatred, Shiki suddenly woke up and found himself tied up next to some weirdo. Noticing he was awake, the brother went over to introduce himself as Nato, who was also a demon like him. His father's body had been preserved elsewhere, so he should rest assured. Saying this, Nato pulled out a white board, then lifted his foot to show off his roller shoes, saying they were very fast. Getting back to the main topic, those with special physique who could use black bones were the heirs of the hero bloodline. To counter them, the demon organization was established, and NATO's mission was to find awakened demons like Shiki, then check if they were suitable talents. After his explanation, NATO put away the board and slid over to untie the protagonist for a chat. Immediately, the young man screamed, asking where his old man was. The senior deducted 1 point and replied that he was currently being preserved. He had mentioned it earlier, and Shiki had just wasted 35 seconds of his life. If there were no more questions, NATO would proceed with the examination. Recognizing that he was being controlled by anger, Shiki calmly took a deep breath, then gave a forced smile, asking the brother to untie him so he could avenge his old man. Asking for help with that tone, only a dog would believe it. NATO hung up an umbrella and said there was a way that suited stubborn people like this. "It seems like you don't get along with ties, do you?" The young man was bewildered, not understanding what was happening before being tightly choked by the brother. NATO said that the nature of a creature would be revealed when facing death. Hurry and use that tiny brain of yours to escape this situation. Shiki knew all too well that if he remained passive, he would surely die. Blood from his body flowed out, but he couldn't do anything about it. Just when NATO thought he was just a fool, the blood on the floor suddenly rose up to attack. The brother carefully retreated and discovered that the brat had entered a frenzied state. After the demon emptied its magazine, Nato immediately deducted 100 points, reasoning that he didn't know how to use demon blood. Despite the demon charging forward to attack frantically, the senior remained unfazed and gave it a sound beating. When he woke up, Shiki once again realized he had fainted without remembering anything. Nato, sitting next to him, explained that because demon blood was so powerful, it was very difficult to control. When in a frenzied state, he would lose his identity and consciousness, becoming a demon that only knew how to destroy everything. Nato extended the umbrella, saying this was different from frenzy, and neutralized it. But he didn't need to know about the power of demon blood anymore because he had been eliminated. Though not understanding much, Shiki knew that this guy was unusually strong. The young man completely submitted, kneeling down, asking the brother to accept him as a subordinate. He wanted to become stronger to avenge his old man. Nato outright refused and evaluated Shiki as too easy to lose control. Not knowing how to use blood and being brainless wouldn't lead to a long life, making the protagonist's face red with anger. Letting a frenzied person wander outside was too dangerous, so Nato had to handle it quickly. He pricked his fingertip and used blood to create an umbrella. With just one action, Shiki quickly understood something and ran off. But instead of running away, he chose to return, determined to go all in. Seeing Shiki seemingly reckless, Nato transformed the umbrella into a spiked ball for defense. Not stopping there, he set up 4 different scenarios to see how the opponent would attack. However, things exceeded expectations when Shiki suddenly jumped up with a gun in hand. The young man had to try hard to keep the gun from firing, only to be blown away by its force. Nato evaluated that the previous move was just luck, and he only needed to use one finger to neutralize it. Not to mention that he would enter a frenzied state when using this power. Indeed, he was just waste that couldn't be used. Saying this, Nato proceeded to release blood reality and created a blood archer to finish Shiki. Shiki stubbornly said he wouldn't be swallowed and neutralize the power. Nato retracted his decision and wondered how he had controlled and directed demon blood. Moreover, restraining the frenzy proved it wasn't just luck. How did he do it after all? Shiki grumpily said if he wanted to know, accept him as a subordinate. Earlier, the protagonist saw the opponent cut his finger and create an umbrella with blood. So he tried to imitate and understood roughly. At that time, Shiki had tried to rack his brains, and unexpectedly, the weapon really appeared. Nato couldn't help but wonder how the kid could control it with such a crazy idea. Someone as easily influenced by emotions as him should be less capable of controlling blood. Kids like this, whenever using their power, must set rules to avoid exceeding safety limits. They even had to seal the most dangerous component deep in the dark prison. Simply put, they had to adjust with reason to avoid losing control when directing blood. But Shiki used explosive emotions to force control over it. Specifically, he followed feelings and instincts, allowing him to unleash enormous power. Shiki assured that he would absorb everything Nato taught and become useful. Nevertheless, Nato still refused because what he did was recklessly betting his life. Nato moved closer, thrust his spear down, and said that he didn't intend to accept Shiki as a subordinate, because from now on, he would become his student. Nato compromised for the young man to pass and continued to explain in the most effective way. Currently, they were on an island far from the mainland called Demon Island, and at the center of the island was a school named Lasat Academy. There, students would be trained to deal with heroes. In short, he would enter the dormitory and be trained to fight the hero organization. The protagonist didn't care, getting up to ask if he could become stronger. Nato thought that would depend on him. Who knew? Shiki was full of determination, saying as long as he became stronger, he'd enter any school. While changing clothes, he was startled to discover 2 horns growing on his head. Nato stood outside, saying that was evidence of the awakening of demon blood. By the way, if he was useless, he would be expelled from school. After changing, Shiki came out asking where his father was. Nato turned away, answering that his father was being preserved where corpses were placed. Nato hoped he wouldn't drown in regret as it would only waste time. If he didn't want to regret again, then he should become stronger. Just when he seemed kind for a moment, he gave Shiki 15 seconds to get to class. If he was still standing there, he'd be expelled. Before entering the class, Shiki was thinking about how to make an impression when Nato kicked him in. The little guy fell on his bottom, got up, noticed his nose bleeding, and stood up asking for a tissue. When he was bluntly refused by Jane, Shiki raised his chin and asked, "Where are your horns? Still a kid who hasn't awakened, right?" Jane raised his horns, saying those who exposed their horns were just rookie blockheads. The young man at the back of the class heard this and stood up, asking, "Who are you talking about?" in a class as noisy as a market. Only the blue-haired guy was the most decent. He was about to take out paper to give when he suddenly remembered he didn't have a single sheet left. With no choice, Four Eyes had to tear a piece from his bag to offer, but was rudely rejected. Before the two could tear into each other, Nato had seated them next to each other and reminded them that this wasn't a place to play. With those words, he stood in the middle of the class and asked, "You are demon, right?" making the whole class go quiet. If no one spoke up, they would go outside to play demon tag. Nato led the whole class to the Le Forest and gave the kids an hour to return to school without being caught by him. If everyone was caught, the game would end. Anyone who couldn't reach the finish line would be expelled immediately. If they thought this was a normal school, they should try dying once. Nato reminded them that after graduation, they would fight the hero organization on the front line. But don't worry, this time he wouldn't use blood, but they were free to do so. Jane glared, saying if he accidentally dealt with him, don't blame him, but Nato didn't show any nervousness, even saying he would let him graduate immediately if he could. Shiki quickly realized this was a way for him to approach that guy, but he didn't dare to take action against him. After Nato briefed the content, everyone was in a ready position, except for the protagonist. Haven't even started, and the kid is already giving up? Shiki clenched his fists and replied, "If you've been so bold to challenge like that, then I'll seriously welcome it." Before starting, Nato took out 2 balls, threw them into the forest, and said that to reach the finish line, they would need these. Due to the large number of students, he divided them into 3 teams in sequence. Teams 2 and 3 would each have 1 ball, while Team 1 would have 2 balls. Just as he was about to open the gate for everyone to enter, Shiki suddenly objected, not wanting to be on the same team as the delusional masked guy. Then a girl named Homer proactively approached to strike up a conversation, leaving the young man bewildered. Shiki was visibly pleased, promising to protect her with all his might, making the girl blush adorably. When he went over to greet Jane, he was met with a massive punch that knocked him flat on the ground, sobbing. Shiki cursed the masked guy for being terrible, then sat down to comfort the girl. Such a pretty face shouldn't be crying, it would be a waste. Jane sincerely advised the blue-haired guy that since he was going to be expelled anyway, he might as well leave. Besides, he didn't care about Shiki's trivial goals, which made Shiki's blood boil. Nato opened the gate and told Team 1 to stop chattering and hurry up. The 2 boys immediately dashed inside to search for the balls, forgetting the girl outside. Reluctantly, Homer had to run alone in fear. Earlier, when Nato said that whoever could defeat him would graduate immediately and be assigned to the team of their choice, Jane thought this was a good opportunity to meet that person. Unexpectedly, Shiki grabbed a stick, jumped up to attack, forcing the masked guy to dodge. He jumped down and asked if there was a problem. The protagonist stood up and retorted that earlier the other had said his reason was trivial. "Take back those words now, you bastard." Jane annoyedly pulled down his mask and said that anyway, the number of balls was limited, so using force to resolve things wouldn't be an issue. Shiki mocked that only small fries would show off old scars. The young man took off his gloves, then used his finger to draw a few lines to release blood reality. Creating several saw blades, Jane tilted his head and asked, "Scared yet?" Shiki stubbornly refused to run away because he came here to avenge his old man. Expecting sympathy, instead, the masked guy glared and said if that was the case, the 2 of them would never get along in this lifetime. Bluehead felt a chill and quickly bit his finger to make blood flow, but he couldn't use his power at all. Shiki wondered why the other could do it so easily while he couldn't. The fact that he could do what Shiki couldn't was infuriating. With no choice, he had to use a wooden stick to face the masked guy. When both rushed in to exchange techniques, they were shocked to realize that the other's saw blades were capable of cutting down the tree entirely. Meanwhile, Homer was searching for everyone when she saw birds flying in disarray along with strange sounds. The clumsy girl slipped and fell face first, then began to feel sorry for herself. Indeed, she was just useless, only capable of relying on others. After lamenting, the pink-haired girl continued on her way to find the 2 boys, not noticing the ball lying nearby. At the gate, the class began to wonder what those sounds were. Everyone was cautious, except for the delinquent who felt excited and wanted to go in to see. Back to the battle, Shiki was fighting while having to be vigilant to avoid getting his head sliced by the saw blades. Switching to direct confrontation was also futile because this evil kid was quite strong in hand-to-hand combat too. During the fight, Shiki suddenly realized that the shape of the other's blood and Teacher Nato's was very different from his own. He wondered if controlling blood had any significance. While pondering, suddenly the masked guy teleported to him, hit him in the face, and knocked him to the floor. However, Shiki didn't feel pain but was bitter about his own ignorance. Before Jane left, the protagonist once again stood up, demanding to continue the fight. The masked guy was so annoyed that he launched a saw blade right when the pink-haired girl stepped out. Fortunately, Shiki quickly pushed her aside, or there would have been a murder. When a drop of blood dripped onto Homer's face, she realized he had been injured because he had shielded her. While the 2 boys were arguing, the girl suddenly bowed deeply, apologizing profusely. Although Shiki said it was the stupid guy's fault, Homer continued to blame herself, inadvertently creating a giant blood demon that looked terribly creepy. Even Jane had to bristle, not expecting the pink-haired girl to possess such an abnormal amount of blood. Homer clutched her head, telling the two boys to run quickly, or she would kill them. As soon as she finished speaking, the demon immediately raised its hand to crush the two young men. Deep in the forest, the principal wondered why the teacher had assigned such a difficult task on the first day of school. Nato believed that rather than wasting a day just explaining, going straight into training would be more effective. Actually, everything he did was for the good of the children. Every year, many demons were killed, mostly children. Many were eliminated just because they had demon blood. Some were even captured alive and became experimental subjects for them. In their final moments, what did they think? Many times, the principal only wished they could live equally in heaven. Nato flatly denied this and believed that if they were strong enough, they wouldn't have to die. Though somewhat harsh in his words, the principal was certain that the teacher was a good person. He asked Nato to help the children grow stronger, then silently left. From the thick smoke, Jane suddenly flew forward, slashing at the arm but didn't achieve much. Shiki shouted, asking if she couldn't stop this thing. Homer was extremely sorry for causing trouble for the two of them, then fainted, looking not well at all. Seeing that she had lost too much blood, Shiki immediately ran to pull the girl out, but the demon wouldn't allow it. It seemed to be doing everything to protect her. Witnessing this, Jane couldn't help but be amazed that blood could have its own will. Suddenly, the demon sat up, vomited a pile of blood to submerge the masked guy. Next, it turned, spewed directly at Shiki, and knocked him out instantly. With the little strength she had left, Homer pleaded, asking Sister to stop. Despite being seriously injured, the blue-haired boy still managed to get up and ask if that demon was her sister. Ignoring all the advice to stop, Shiki would still stay to find a way to pull his friend out. He hated the feeling of watching someone leave right before his eyes, and moreover, Homer was in such pain, how could he abandon her? The demon extended its hand to shield its little sister, and began to roar so loudly that even the kids outside could feel it. What on earth was happening inside? From afar, Nato silently observed and wondered how the kids would overcome this demon. Without much thought, Shiki immediately put his hand on the ground, but still couldn't control the blood. Just as Nato had guessed, at that time, the kid had simply been lucky to be able to use it. The demon slammed down hard, picked up a handful of rocks, and threw them straight at Shiki, injuring him considerably. Indeed, without being able to use his power, he was completely helpless. He had never lost a fight before, yet he let his old man get killed. It was at that moment that Shiki broke down in tears because of his own weakness. Jane coldly told the crybaby to go somewhere else if he wanted to cry, then rolled up his sleeves. He used 2 fingers to make a few cuts to create weapons from blood. Although he still felt the sting from the previous blow, he still wanted to have a proper fight to prove himself. Nato observed that simultaneously creating objects with different shapes was a very advanced technique. Despite having superior skill and experience, there were still many shortcomings. Demon blood could freely change the shape and hardness of the blood fluid. What was visualized in the mind would send signals from the brain, transmitted not only through nerves but also blood vessels to create the shape. Since they were signals from the brain, they could reflect psychological trauma, preferences, or experiences. In short, creating one's own weapon using blood fluid was called releasing blood reality. Taking advantage of the demon's sluggishness, Jane used the saw blade as a foothold to jump into the air. Next, he aimed straight for the neck to deliver a finishing blow, but it sacrificed an arm to save its life. While the two were fighting, Shiki could only stand there watching without contributing anything. Come to think of it, from earlier until now, the masked guy had only created things to slash. Meanwhile, Homer was unconsciously calling for her sister to stop attacking. It was at that moment that Shiki suddenly remembered his passion for guns. In fact, he had even created one to confront the teacher and inadvertently smiled. While Jane was moving carelessly, the demon let out a loud scream to neutralize the eardrum. Nato, seeing the unstable situation, ran down when a familiar voice rose. By the time he turned back, Jane and the teacher couldn't believe Shiki had already figured out how to use it. The demon didn't bother listening to the ramblings and used its hand to crush Shiki. However, Shiki had timely jumped to the side, then pointed the gun, telling it to clench its teeth. Then he pulled the trigger, blowing away the demon's body with just one shot, much to the surprise of the teacher and student. Just as the demon was blown to bits, the sky suddenly poured rain, shocking Jane. Shiki, with his eyes barely open, asked if the little friend was okay. Then it was his turn to collapse, unable to move. Nato appeared and explained that the boy's body had been exhausted after firing a concentrated amount of blood. The stubborn young man struggled to stand up, saying he was fine, then fell again. Nato warned that losing too much blood could mean logging out, so just lie still. Shiki told him to prioritize Homer first and then himself later. But before the teacher could do anything, he was ambushed by the masked guy. Seeing that this umbrella couldn't be cut, Jane quickly retreated and challenged, despite the other two being close to death. No amount of persuasion could convince the stubborn kid to listen. Although he didn't want to discriminate, Nato really hated the type of student who abandoned their friends. Jane didn't care and only wanted to deal with him as quickly as possible to join the team he wanted. The teacher guaranteed he wouldn't use blood, so no worries. With those words, the masked guy went berserk, charging forward with relentless attacks, but couldn't cut the umbrella. Nato revealed that this umbrella wasn't an ordinary type, then pressed a button to release smoke. Jane immediately became vigilant of his surroundings to avoid being ambushed, only to have several holes punched in his hand. Nato knew this student was of the close combat type, so he deliberately kept his distance. Although they were just rubber bullets, they were still effective on the right arm that had been injured when fighting the demon. On the other side, Jane proceeded to release Blood Reality, then ran out to launch saw blades in attack. So he also knew how to deal with long-range opponents and wasn't just a pure close combat type. Just as Jane was about to close in, Nato took out a smoke bomb and threw it towards the student to hide. While the masked guy wasn't paying attention, he suddenly charged forward and ambushed him from behind. Nato criticized the student for still being young and green. With injuries all over like that, he couldn't win against him even in his dreams. Learn to evaluate the opponent's skills properly. After giving advice, the teacher opened the umbrella and used it to control the delinquent student. Though it sounded bitter, if this were a real battle, Jane would have logged out already. Do you want to meet your father so badly that you're this stubborn? When hearing this, Jane halted and asked, "How do you know about that?" Nato revealed that he had investigated a little and knew that his father was a hero. The masked guy tightened his fist with hatred, admitting that man was indeed his father, and also the bastard who had taken everything from him. That person had stolen both his family and the admiration he had for him. Thanks to the scars all over his body that he left behind, Jane had never forgotten this hatred. To kill that trash, Jane had done everything, including digging through garbage to eat. For that goal, even if he died, he wasn't afraid. Although the will to survive was admirable, it only made the teacher more annoyed. Nato grabbed his head, slammed it to the ground, and cursed. "You're just a child. What do you know to talk like that?" Then he stood up and advised the blockhead student not to die for a goal but live for it. If he didn't understand that, then he had no future. Although the anger had not yet subsided, at least Jane had accepted to let go. Under the pouring rain, the teacher called and asked the school to send medical staff here. Currently, the masked guy was tied to a tree, and the pink-haired girl was unconscious, so only Shiki remained, but he was also exhausted. Nato took out a ball and said there were 5 minutes left. He gave Shiki 2 choices. 1. Find the remaining ball in 5 minutes and return to the finish line. Or 2. Steal it from his hand. Shiki gritted his teeth, knowing he had no chance of beating him. So he chose the second option and ran off. While Jane was trying to escape, the blue-haired boy suddenly emerged from the bushes and approached, proposing cooperation. Shiki alone couldn't defeat the teacher, so he needed Jane to lend a hand. Jane sat down and advised him to put his ego aside. But this guy was willing to cooperate with someone he hated for his goal. By the way, Shiki's old man was also a hero. So Shiki just wanted to say that they weren't without common ground, that's all. If he understood now, then please cooperate with Shiki. Deep in the forest, Nato was hunting them down when he suddenly discovered his student shouting in the rain. He immediately jumped down to block the way, asking where he was going in such a hurry. Running back to school without a ball meant elimination. Actually, Shiki was angry not because the stupid guy wouldn't cooperate, but because he dared to use his benefactor as bait. It was indeed bitter. Before jumping down to ambush, Teacher Jane had flatly refused to cooperate. Instead, the masked guy demanded Shiki cooperate under his command before he would agree. Having shown such arrogance, he'd better succeed. Nato casually dodged to the side and wondered how they would defeat him. Just as he discovered the rope, Jane had already quickly used it to tie him up. Then both joined forces to pull the teacher closer. Although the two pulled with all their might, Nato knew they were very weak. What were they trying to do? While pondering their motive, suddenly a saw blade flew towards him, forcing Nato to dodge to the side. Taking advantage of the moment, the teacher lost his balance. Shiki immediately ran to grab the ball. The skilled teacher deliberately let it fall right next to him to lure the student. If Jane took the ball and ran, Shiki would also chase to steal it. Then he just needed to escape and reclaim the ball, and it would be over. Unexpectedly, Shiki suddenly shouted loudly, calling for the masked guy to take the ball and run to the finish line, leaving the teacher astonished. He then made a smug face, boasting that he had already gotten the teacher's ball. Only when Nato reminded him of the rules did the young man suddenly remember the original purpose. If only Nato returned to the finish line, he would still be expelled. But thanks to Shiki's foolishness, all of the teacher's predictions had fallen apart. Now Jane just needed to run straight to the finish line to complete the test. But somehow, the blue-haired guy's voice kept echoing in his head. After considering for a while, the young man decided to turn back, and Shiki thought he had lost his way. Jane shouted, "I just don't want to owe anything. Even if I get expelled, I will still accomplish my goal by myself. So you go to the finish line." Just as he was about to hand over the ball, suddenly a whole pig blocked the way, forcing Jane to brake abruptly. Seeing Shiki looking surprised, NATO explained that this was an ultra-fast messenger animal. After pressing a button, the group suddenly received news that the demon organization's branch elsewhere was under attack by heroes and needed urgent reinforcement. By the time the rain stopped, the students at the gate had been waiting endlessly without seeing them return. Could all three of them have been eliminated? After waiting a bit longer, the group saw them return, except for Homer. NATO ran over to explain the situation and temporarily suspended the practice session, displeasing the rogue. The situation was that a branch was under attack, so they would head to Kyoto immediately. While moving, Shiki, after a period of practice, finally managed to make his horns disappear and was visibly pleased. Lumia didn't care and criticized the young man for showing off over such a trivial thing, making the blue-haired guy bitter and wanting to fight. Meanwhile, Four Eyes was informed by the teacher that when they arrived, the kids would be helping with minor tasks. To put it bluntly, they wouldn't be fighting. While Lumia was complaining, Shiki turned back to taunt that fortunately, the tag game was postponed. Otherwise, he would have been expelled. Four Eyes advised his friend to look more objectively because minor tasks were also work. NATO assured the whole class that they would only be helping with minor tasks unless they wanted the number of casualties to increase, making the atmosphere even heavier. Because the old uniforms were too conspicuous, he had made the kids change into uniforms. Additionally, he reminded everyone to behave like normal students and not cause trouble to avoid being caught. The silver-haired student stood up and asked what specifically these minor tasks were. NATO explained that the demon organization had units distributed in all major cities. There, they had two missions. One was to fight on the front line, and the other was to support demons who had blended in with humans, including protecting demon orphans and providing life counseling. Hearing the teacher assign the whole class to the support team, Shiki felt disappointed because the opportunity to grow stronger had slipped away. If he could go to the front line, perhaps he would have encountered that old man. NATO affirmed that the hero Shiki was looking for wasn't in Kyoto, as their organization also operated by region. But unfortunately, the place they were heading to had someone very dangerous. Before arriving at the headquarters, NATO led the whole class to a very ordinary-looking restaurant with nothing outstanding. Suddenly, an old lady came out to welcome them and led everyone inside. Then she lifted up a basement door, bowed, and welcomed them for visiting. Somewhere else, the team leader Kiri held up a head and complained that these maggots even knew how to form groups, and they even imitated humans too. The deputy team leader was irritated because her brother was always exaggerating, making cleanup later tiresome. Kiri threw the head away, wishing they would send a female demon here. The previous one used for research had died, so they needed another to replace it. The deputy admitted that she really hated her senior's disgusting research and wasn't interested, especially in that mess of a hybrid monster. Kiri patted her head, saying it only ate demons. The deputy reminded him that their job was to track and deal with demons, not research. Kiri shared that he joined to satisfy his passion for researching demon blood. To put it bluntly, they had such amazing abilities. In short, if he successfully researched demon blood and could control it, their organization would be unstoppable. Additionally, they could make tons of money by turning their blood into medicine. After chatting, Kiri suddenly poked his head out to scare a kid hiding nearby. Seeing this, the deputy went over and knocked the child unconscious, accidentally letting a drop of blood splash onto her senior's clothes. Immediately, Kiri approached and ruthlessly sucked it up. He admitted he was interested in demon blood, but ultimately it was just dirty blood. After warming up thoroughly, the young man sat down and asked if the kids' parents were around to make amends. He wanted to see the kids' parents' faces, but there were too many corpses to tell who was who. After repeated questioning with the kid still stubbornly refusing to answer, Kiri gathered everything together and crushed it all for convenience. Typically, heroes use black bacteria secreted from their bodies to create weapons or use it for other purposes, but it's not as horrifying as letting bacteria invade and manipulate this guy's body. After finishing off the child, Kiri scratched his head, asked the monster to clean up the rest, and casually left. Meanwhile, the whole class was amazed to discover that beneath Kyoto was a magnificent basement system. Behind the door at the end of the path was the Kyoto branch of the demon organization. While the class was still looking around, suddenly a doctor came out to chat with NATO. Then he fixed his hair to flirt with the sister, but was flatly rejected. Though he seemed flirtatious, the young man was actually the support team leader at this branch. He had also studied with teacher NATO at Lasat Academy. The teacher allowed the flirtatious guy to freely use his students. Knowing he was about to go to the front lines, the kids showed their desire to go along, but NATO wouldn't allow it. Seeing the students who had just arrived, the nurse immediately called for the children to change clothes and lend a hand. While moving around, the class saw many injured people being brought back from the front lines. There, Shiki discovered a man who was so seriously injured that he had only about 3 minutes to live. Although the doctor had said he wouldn't die, the protagonist still didn't believe him and told him not to speak so irresponsibly. The team leader confidently boasted that he was actually quite skilled. Saying this, he took out several bags of blood and began demonstrating his skills for the entire class to see. As evening fell, the demon organization was horrified to discover that both the deputy and team leader had been killed by the heroes. Given the circumstances, NATO was forced to release blood reality to respond to them. Kiri used several corpses to block the attack, then asked if the opponent was touring here. Kiri was curious if he knew where the demons were secretly gathering. If that place could be destroyed, the number of demons in this area would decrease a lot. Although NATO had answered that he didn't know, the other guy still smelled deceit. What if there was something at a famous tourist spot? The teacher knew this guy's intuition was no joke, so he took out his umbrella and said he would take him on a tour in hell. Back at the emergency room, Shiki couldn't help but wonder why they were transfusing blood to that guy instead of the patient. Before proceeding, the doctor would ask for the opinion of whether he wanted to choose hands or legs. The big brother sighed, saying because he had a newborn child, he wanted hands to hold it tightly. The doctor accepted the request and also warned in advance that the blood transfusion would be very painful, so he should endure it. Though the patient's blood wasn't suitable for fighting, it was very convenient. It would enhance a demon's recovery ability many times over. When a certain amount of blood flowed down the throat, the patient would have a violent seizure, forcing the students to sit down and help hold him. As the blood bags gradually emptied, the nurse turned and asked the rest to go to the next room to get a few more bags. With the help of the whole class, the man's arm gradually regenerated, startling Shiki. Before everyone's eyes, the 2 arms finally grew back completely intact. Even the serious wound on his chest slowly healed as if nothing had happened. The doctor explained that if he received a small amount of blood, he could be treated as many times as desired, but having absorbed such a large amount, the body would create antibodies. This meant that no matter how many times he absorbed blood, his legs could not be regenerated. Saying this, he sat down and consoled the big brother that he could no longer stay in the combat team. So from now on, he should retreat to the rear to provide support. He would make him a pair of really good prosthetic legs so he could run and jump with his child. But for now, he should focus on recovery training. Hearing this, the patient burst into tears and thanked him profusely. Next, the doctor stood up and said that in the future, they might be the ones lying there. He understood they had enough reasons to go to the front lines, but they should remember that it wasn't the only battlefield. It was thanks to a solid rear guard that everyone could fight wholeheartedly at the front. Standing behind and healing injured demons with all their might was the work of the support team. Upon hearing this speech, even Lumia had to clench her fist and praise that he was truly cool. Though a bit flirtatious, he was truly a man. Having gained the trust of the entire class, the doctor had something else to ask Shiki for help with. The thing was, he wanted to ask him to take care of the little girl sitting over there. It seemed her house had been attacked by heroes, so the whereabouts of her parents were still unknown. Therefore, the doctor wanted to ask Shiki to care for that poor little girl. Trusted with this, he went over, sat down, and conversed with an open attitude. However, no matter what he said, the little girl still ignored Shiki. But when he mentioned the temple, the little girl spoke up and asked what that was. She had never been to school before, so she didn't know about that place. Seeing the support team return with a large number of dead bodies, the nurse couldn't help but wonder why as many as 30 people were left behind like that. Sadly, among those victims were the little girl's parents. Even though he had been in this profession for many years, the doctor never got used to this heartbreaking scene. Before they engaged in fighting, Kiri was curious whether his gift had been delivered yet. Since NATO wanted to know, he revealed it. He had placed demon corpses containing his bacteria in easy-to-find places. To put it bluntly, the corpses that he could control at will would be brought by the demon team into their own lair. At the headquarters, the doctor asked Shiki to move the other bodies first, not knowing they were under the control of the evil man outside. With a few simple operations, Kiri could control the body of the deceased father. When they returned, both were shocked to discover that the father was strangling his daughter. The doctor immediately recognized this as Kiri's ability and told Shiki to cover the girl's eyes. Saying this, he stepped forward and stabbed the father's head with a surgical knife to rescue the girl. To stop it, the only way was to destroy the brain. When Shiki slammed down and cursed Kiri a scum, the doctor silently thought that it seemed like the corpses here had all been infected with that guy's bacteria. Suddenly, the girl's mother rose and strangled Shiki, making the situation more chaotic. The doctor, seeing this, was about to take out his knife to deal with it, but was unexpectedly rushed and subdued by the zombies. During transport, a pile of corpses suddenly rose up and attacked the medical staff. They even rushed in to strangle patients, leaving people no time to react. Recognizing that this chaotic situation was all caused by Kiri, the doctor, though very much wanting to help, found the zombies too aggressive. Witnessing the girl crying right in front of him made Shiki hesitate, not knowing whether to use his weapon. Before coming here, Nato had given him a pistol for self-defense. The bullets had been soaked in Shiki's blood, so they were much more powerful than normal. However, Shiki was only to use it when necessary. After an inner struggle, Shiki chose to hug the little girl and point the gun behind him. Then, he pulled the trigger to end the girl's mother's life. Not stopping there, the protagonist continued firing to send the remaining zombies to the scoreboard. After dealing with them, the doctor thanked him profusely and said that the support team had no fighting ability at all, so he would take the patients to safety while Shiki was asked to handle the situation out there. Back at the clinic, the class was fighting back and constantly wondering why everything had turned out like this. No matter how much they fought, the zombies would still rise. This was not simple at all. While everyone was figuring out how to deal with them, Shiki spoke up, telling the class to aim for the head when attacking. Following his advice, Jane immediately released Blood Reality to help. The others would evacuate patients urgently as instructed by the doctor. Although he was doing very well, Shiki was disgusted with himself for having to take down corpses once more. On the other side, Four Eyes and Silver Hair volunteered to transport patients. Lumia would stay behind to hold off the soulless zombies. Even knowing they were all dead, Shiki still felt very heavy having to strike down these people. They must all have loved ones. Why did they have to suffer such a tragic fate? One by one, they fell, making Shiki's emotions more mixed. When he saw the girl's parents leave once more before their daughter's eyes, he felt like crying and was enraged at the crimes the enemy had committed. To stop that guy, Nato quickly rushed forward to deliver a finishing blow, but was blocked by the corpses. While he wasn't paying attention, the monster stood right next to him and grabbed the pile of corpses. Kiri wondered why he looked so sad. Wasn't eliminating maggots an obvious thing to do? Nato glared and said villainy had its limits, but the other guy didn't seem to care much. When he learned the demon's plan to return to headquarters to support those in trouble, Kiri immediately asked his junior to use bacteria to create a cube to imprison everyone inside. The blonde revealed that he had attached tracking devices to the corpses, and they were sending signals from a very interesting place. Thanks to those corpses, he now knew that the demon headquarters was beneath the temple. Kiri smiled smugly, asking permission to go ahead and hoping Nato would come to see if he was still alive. Following her senior's orders, the deputy issued instructions and allowed the monster to enter the cube, alarming everyone. Actually, that monster was mass-produced, so even if it broke down, Kiri wouldn't care. With those words, he snapped his fingers, causing the monster's stomach to swell. Before everyone could understand what was happening, it had completed self-destruct mode to take everyone down with it. The terrible explosion immediately destroyed the cube and everything in the surrounding area. After it ended, Kiri bluntly commented that the explosion still wasn't that grand and needed more improvements. After his assessment, he casually left without looking back to confirm because that place was too dusty, and it would be troublesome if blood got on him. Besides, even if it was Nato, he couldn't survive that explosion, so just let it be. After hours of fighting, the class finally dealt with the corpses. The patients had also been moved to another room, so there was nothing to worry about for now. Importantly, they had left a deep trauma for that poor little girl. The doctor approached her side, apologizing for frightening her. Despite knowing the situation was urgent, Shiki still stepped forward to confess that it was he who had struck down her mother. The little girl sadly recounted that all her life, she had always lived in hiding, so she never got to go to school like peers her age. Her family was always on the run, moving from place to place, so she had somehow expected this would happen eventually. To not make everyone worry, the little girl forced a smile, saying he didn't need to be concerned about her. Shiki's heart ached, unable to believe those were the words of a child whose parents had been killed right before her eyes. When he was little, he really admired the righteous heroes on TV. Those superheroes who eliminated evil and enforced justice looked really cool. He even imitated every move in front of his old man. So he was very angry when he learned this was how those considered heroes in fairy tales acted. If the heroes dared to commit such atrocities, he'd rather choose to be the villain. A villain who would eliminate those trash heroes. Shiki hugged the little girl tightly and swore that he would create a world where she could smile in the future, so she should rest assured. It was at that moment that the little girl's eyes gradually lit up with a ray of hope in the current gloomy atmosphere. After everything settled down, the doctor asked Jane to move and store the bodies at the crematorium. While leading him there, he admitted that if it weren't for this incident, he wouldn't have shown this. At the same time, Shiki decided to stay at the clinic to comfort the little girl. His friends were working hard carrying bodies to the collection point. The blue-haired boy frowned, denying Lumia's call not to have such unfounded prejudice. Four Eyes argued that if they had been attacked, this place was not safe either. As a precaution, he had initiated blood reality by biting his fingertip. Then he used his own blood to identify all living creatures within a 5-kilometer radius from where it was dropped. The detection skill allowed the blue-haired boy to quickly view many places within the range, but because he wasn't proficient, he couldn't identify faces or the strength of those scanned. After a period of checking, Four Eyes suddenly discovered something and paused for a moment. In the evening at the restaurant, Kiri called to ask the headquarters to send a few more monsters to the designated location. When asked why, the young man replied that he was preparing to explore the Demon Island. After killing the shop owner, Kiri also reminded them to send his trump card monster, and also to send information about a noteworthy demon to him. After the brother hung up, the junior remarked that it was very spacious down there. Should they use poison gas to deal with the demons down there? Kiri found this idea not bad, then opened his phone to look at the information sent by headquarters. After reading, he smiled dangerously and stood up, saying he would go down personally. Kiri instructed the deputy that before taking action, remember to ask for names properly. It seemed like that kid named Shiki or something was a special individual very worth researching. Let's turn the final chapter of the fairy tale into a spectacular ending. Though life was never easy, the little girl still found joy through small things. She liked watching sunsets in the park, observing school buildings from outside the fence, and giving flowers to her beloved mother. Although the family frequently moved from place to place, the child was extremely happy with her parents. As long as she could be with them, no matter what happened, she was content. Sadly, that peaceful home was taken away by that trash hero. That small happiness now only existed in memories, causing the girl pain whenever she recalled it. After being shown the way by the doctor, Jane still couldn't believe there was even a crematorium here. The brother explained that when battles broke out, many people would be carried in like this. Of course, there would also be those who couldn't be saved in time, hence the crematorium. This was the cruel world that Jane was about to enter. In the midst of solemnity, suddenly the brother started joking, asking if the kid had a girlfriend yet. Just as he sensed the killing intent and the doctor turned his head, he was stabbed. Before both of their eyes, Kiri calmly pulled out his knife, blaming the doctor for turning around too much, which made him stab inaccurately. Jane panicked, quickly creating several saw blades on his hand and rushing to deal with the opponent immediately. However, before the kid could do anything rash, he was ambushed by the deputy from behind. Just as he was about to nod, the doctor suddenly grabbed his clothes and pulled him away, ruining the plan. So the girl had no choice but to create a cube to break the masked guy's arm. Though knowing the wound would heal quickly, the painful feeling remained. If they continued to linger here, both would be done for. Therefore, the doctor asked his little brother to run and inform Shiki's group, remembering to tell them to evacuate the patients first. He would stay behind and hold them off for as long as he could. Seeing blood continuously flowing from Jane's side, he immediately ran to call for help. After the two had discussed, Kiri asked his subordinate to finish the rest. The doctor wondered if the girl was building walls using bacteria to crush the entire headquarters. Actually, the deputy was just erecting a barrier to seal almost the entire basement of the temple. In other words, not giving the demons a way to escape. Indeed, beautiful ladies were always so harsh. The doctor assessed that the current situation was really not good at all. Inside, only the students could fight, and reinforcements from outside couldn't get in. Not to mention that the two standing in front of him were hopelessly strong. It was truly frustrating. When hearing the blonde mention Shiki, the doctor didn't hesitate to take out a syringe containing aconite toxin. To be honest, he really wanted to run away, but doing so would be too embarrassing. Just as he finished speaking, Kiri suddenly teleported over and sliced a path, causing blood to splash everywhere. The doctor tried to stop the bleeding but failed and died instantly. Though a demon, Kiri had to admit the color of their blood was truly beautiful. Seeing that the opponent was no longer moving, he casually walked over to use bacteria to take over the corpse. But at the last minute, Kiri changed his mind and told his subordinate to quickly let the monsters in. After they entered, one of them vomited out a slimy coffin that was disgusting to look at. After they removed the bandages, Kiri smiled and declared that everything was ready. Back at headquarters, Jane hurriedly went to report, finding everyone gathered in a room. Shiki lowered his gun, saying they had discovered the heroes through Four Eyes' enemy detection ability. Most patients had been moved to the ground until the group was blocked by a black bone screen. In short, they were the ones trapped here. Lumia wanted to split up to find a way out, but the nurse believed there was no more way out. All had been blocked by that black thing. Just then, a monster boldly walked in and ate a man right before everyone's eyes. While it was eating, everyone immediately separated to run away lest they be devoured raw. Even the students hurriedly evacuated rather than standing together in one place, which would have meant logging out like fate. A moment later, Kiri and the remaining monsters finally reached the room drenched in blood. Upon entering, he had to exclaim that these demons built such a beautiful base underground. After the coffin was placed down, he told his junior to slaughter everyone except Shiki. Remember to capture him alive and bring him here. He would sit here and wait, thinking of research methods to pass the time. While the deputy was leading the monsters on the hunt, on the other side, Kuna was rummaging through cabinets to find another set of clothes to change into. Silverhair thought he had hypertension, lying there complaining of headaches. Kuna threw a towel at his face, warning that if he dared to peep, she would break his neck. When she learned that he was about to go fight back, Silverhair pulled down the towel and praised her for being so good. Indeed, healthy people always think positively, unlike him, who always thought negatively, making himself feel insecure. Kuna didn't care much and told the coward to just lie there overthinking. Only when the kid uttered the words, "Please help," did she change her mind and tell her friend to hide in the wardrobe over there. Silverhair asked in amazement if it was okay, and Kuna licked her lips, replying, "Didn't you want to rely on me?" After warming up, the fierce girl confidently invited the little monster to come and play. Meanwhile, the other guy was hiding in the wardrobe, hoping nothing would happen. Inside, it was too dark, making him terribly scared. After breaking through the wall, the monster slowly approached and asked if she was Shiki. Feeling offended, the monster immediately rushed forward with relentless attacks, making the guy hiding in the wardrobe pale with fear, even fainting. After it had wreaked havoc, Kuna calmly approached and released blood reality by biting her fingertip, then using her own blood to create a pair of gloves that looked extremely wild and stimulating. While Jane was running to find the doctor in the tunnel, the deputy was still hunting for Shiki in the base. Lumia also encountered a monster, but was still bitter that it compared her with the protagonist. At the backyard, Shiki decided to hold hands and lead the little girl into the thick bushes for safety. When he woke up, Silverhair couldn't help but wonder why it was so quiet outside. It turned out that all the terrible things from before were just hallucinations. How fortunate. When he opened the door, the young man was shocked to find the monster lying right next to him. As it obediently left, he wondered why it didn't do anything to him, and somehow it became that girl's pet now. Kuna gently asked it to lower its head for cuddling, then suddenly punched it in the face, leaving Silverhair bewildered. Not stopping there, she continued punching until the monster lay sprawled on the floor. Watching his friend brutally beat it, he had to curl up under the blanket. He hadn't expected Kuna to be so scary. Once stained with her blood, the opponent would be enchanted and gradually lose their will. Even if the opponent was a monster, it was still just a punching bag for Kuna to practice on. There was no need for him to lift a finger. She was more than capable of taking it down herself. Back when she was navigating society, Kuna was a big sister admired and loved by many people. However, her best friend said she was a woman devoted to the point of obsession. Kuna would take care of every meal, sleep, and even help brush teeth, which seemed very sweet until the jealous girl forbade her from going to work to avoid contact with women. Gradually, those boyfriends felt uncomfortable and either broke up or became wrecks. Therefore, weak people who liked to rely on others, like Silverhair, were inadvertently Kuna's ideal type of boyfriend. She spread a mattress with dedication and carefully lifted him onto it, taking care of him like royalty. While one by one, people were being skewered to death outside. Kuna was worried because her friend's complexion looked terrible. Though being cared for attentively, the young man thought this girl was pretending to be nice to use him as bait. Just as she was about to brew ginger tea for her friend, suddenly another monster appeared. As soon as it discovered its target, the monster immediately used its super elastic tentacles to attack. Without hesitation, Silverhair once again hid in the wardrobe, leaving Kuna to handle it beautifully like before. Though knowing this one was different from the previous one, she was just annoyed that their fun was disturbed. The friend impatiently jumped up to attack. Unexpectedly, the monster dodged to the side and stabbed her hand. It carefully kept its distance and continued using tentacles to tightly lock both hands, not giving Kuna a chance to approach. Then it dragged her entire body, slamming her from place to place in a brutal manner. When the prey no longer had the strength to resist, the monster immediately approached to use its feet to torture Kuna. Witnessing his friend lying unconscious, Silverhair silently thought that this life was as good as over. At this rate, she would be killed by it. What should he do? Surely someone would come to the rescue. However, when he saw Kuna dying, Silverhair questioned himself. Why had he become such a coward? Before becoming a coward, the young man once had a first love who was 1 year older. Whenever in front of her, he felt invincible, always liking to do risky things to show off to her. Though talking big and being reckless, he still trembled. Back then, Silverhair was born in a small village with quite a few demons living disguised among humans, and every evening, the two would usually go to the vacant lot to dance together and watch the sunset. On the day of the festival, everything was proceeding smoothly in a bustling atmosphere. Things weren't worth mentioning until the sister suddenly fell ill in his arms. When examined, the doctor revealed that when a demon starts growing horns, the blood fluid changes. Because they couldn't go to the hospital like normal people, Silverhair had asked the only demon doctor in town for treatment. Initially, everything was still fine until the town where he lived was attacked by the hero organization. As a result, the only demon doctor was killed by them. Noticing that his sister's health was gradually weakening over time, Silverhair was unwilling and planned to go to another town to invite a doctor to come and treat her. In response, the sister, breathing heavily, instructed her little brother to always be as cool as he was, then closed her eyes and passed away. She was the fortress that helped Silverhair feel secure in being stronger. So her sudden departure made him consumed by worries and insecurities that had accumulated for so long. After many days of insomnia, his hair gradually turned to the current silver color. Also because he couldn't overcome the pain of that loss, he had unknowingly become a pathetic coward. Although Kuna's life was being seriously threatened, Silverhair could only hide and lurk like a coward. But when he remembered his sister's instructions to always be as cool as he was, Silverhair didn't hesitate to rush out and save Kuna from imminent death. He didn't want to disappoint his sister and didn't want to upset his friend. If he didn't change right now, he wouldn't have the face to meet his lover in heaven later. He had to be strong enough to say that even without her, he would still be super cool. He would write his own story. Though talking big like that, when facing reality, Silverhair was still scared to the point that his heart wanted to jump out. But instead of avoiding it, he bit his fingertip to release blood reality. After his lover appeared, Silverhair boldly asked if she would still be by his side. Through the embrace, he found the answer that he had forgotten. When the insecurity disappeared, Silverhair became a completely different person. With abundant confidence, he calmly created countless flower petals made from his own blood. As soon as the monster moved to attack, Silverhair immediately teleported over, destroying the two tentacle arms with the cherry blossom rain technique. His ability was to turn his blood into a storm of cherry blossoms as sharp as knives, then create wind scythes as desired. Silverhair proudly declared that now he was invincible. Along with that, he also realized that it was all thanks to having his sister by his side that he had this power. When dancing with her, he remembered the summer festival. He knew full well that she had realized he was just trying to appear invincible. Yet she still believed that he was very strong and cool. Indeed, how gentle she was. Silverhair slowly approached the monster with slow dance steps and sky-high confidence. Next, he continuously launched sharp attacks, fast as a storm, leaving it only able to stand still and take the hits. With the power of love, the monster was quickly cut into pieces by the storm attack. Through this battle, Silverhair regained his spirit and had enough courage to take another step forward. He told himself, from now on, as long as his sister believed in him, he would hold his head high and say, "Don't I look cool?" In another direction, Shiki suddenly discovered that the little girl's mood was getting worse. She curled up, expressing that she wanted to follow her parents, but the big brother absolutely refused. Under no circumstances was she allowed to choose that path. If she died, then her entire family would be losers. Only by continuing to live and smiling in the future would she win at life. Shiki placed his hand on her shoulder, hoping the child would live and fight against despair. But now he wanted the girl to cheer him on as he went to crush those who had taken away her parents. If by then she still wanted to live, then cheer for him from the bottom of her heart, okay? But just as he turned away, the little girl advised him to stay because he would lose. Shiki determinedly affirmed that he wouldn't lose. Though it was just empty talk, his heart told him that he couldn't lose, so don't worry. He definitely wouldn't succumb to despair, making the little girl feel confused. After opening his eyes, Nato sat up and asked how long he had been unconscious. The subordinates replied that he had closed his eyes for about 15 minutes since the explosion occurred. It was because he had shielded them that he ended up like this. Despite being quite injured, Nato still continued to return to headquarters, making everyone feel very anxious. He just had to grit his teeth and endure it because his students were still in there. At the clinic, Shiki suddenly walked in and asked if he was a hero. When he learned that this kid was a special subject that needed to be captured alive, Kiri's eyes lit up, admitting he was the one Shiki was looking for. Immediately, Shiki raised his neck and cursed. How could he do such outrageous things? How could he do such things that defiled the dead? What's wrong with you, you psycho? Kiri laughed and said, "Kid, don't imitate humans like that. Only heroes and humans with human rights can say that. Since when do demons have human rights?" Hearing this, Shiki took out his democracy gun with the determination to crush this scum at all costs. While searching, Dr. Jane was suddenly called by the deputy, who who asked if he was going to collect the demon's corpse. Being a demon with a sense of teamwork, it sounded somehow disgusting. The masked guy denied it, saying he only cared about his own goal. Don't misunderstand. Anyone who dared to block his way would be eliminated. Without giving the opponent time to create a cube, Jane immediately charged forward to deliver a finishing blow. But something felt off. When he turned to look, the deputy walked out casually, saying with just that much, he couldn't cut her. Back at the clinic, Kiri calmly threw a knife, knocking the pistol away, and said, "Don't joke around. Your blood isn't inferior, don't hide your cards anymore." Shiki angrily created a democracy gun with blood, then clearly declared that he would use all his strength to defeat him, to avenge the family of his little sister, and pointed the gun up to fire at the blonde. The entire room was suddenly blown away. Even Shiki was affected by the force of the explosion. After that attack, Kiri wasn't scratched at all as he had dodged in time. As for Shiki, he was pleased to know that his opponent feared him. After observing the previous move, Kiri became even more interested and decided to take Shiki seriously. Saying this, he summoned a corpse from the coffin, stunning the protagonist. Even the bodies of his comrades, he dared to control. Truly an incurable madman, Kiri chuckled, criticizing the blue-haired boy for being a fool. Fools always believe their standards are correct without a hint of doubt. Keeping that belief for oneself is fine, but imposing that view on others is stupidity. Kiri revealed that he had voluntarily become a puppet. As soon as the corpse transmitted something into Shiki's body, he suddenly felt extremely heavy. The blonde explained that if he controlled a hero, he could control that person's abilities too. This one's ability was to mix bacteria and oxygen in the air to change its weight. What surprised Kiri was that even after death, he still mumbled that demons must be completely eliminated. How strong were his obsession and resentment? Truly an exemplary hero's soul. If his friend was the soul, then he was the limbs. He would personally wash away his final regrets. If Shiki didn't quickly find a way out, he would be flattened by the pressure from the weight. Meanwhile, the reinforcement group outside had slashed through all their swords without any effect. It seemed that the black wall created wasn't ordinary at all. The subordinates thought about trying other entrances, but NATO confirmed all were blocked. It wasn't that they couldn't break through, but there were many tourists visiting above. If they destroyed it, it could cause significant damage, so they didn't dare. While considering options, suddenly Four Eyes ran over to report that all patients had been evacuated to the ground. However, Shiki's group and part of the support team were still trapped inside. NATO knew that if they didn't hurry, the kids would certainly be in danger, but the current situation was too bad. Just then, a subordinate brought Homer, asking if he knew this shy girl. The pink-haired girl trembled, apologizing 1,000 times, then approached saying, "Teacher, I've come to help." Suddenly, a blue-haired guy crawled out, making advances and expressing his desire to lose his virginity, giving the girl a heavy shock. When scolded by the teacher, the young man even flared up and talked back. And here NATO thought this student was mature. It was truly disappointing. Putting that aside, the teacher had thought of a way to evacuate all tourists and needed Homer's help. Saying this, he led the girl outside and told Four Eyes to keep his phone for communication. The next step would be to create a small earthquake to force tourists to evacuate. The plan was for NATO and Homer to cause a small landslide on the hill. If it was just a small earthquake, tourists might not be willing to leave. Therefore, NATO believed that if there was a landslide, they would certainly evacuate. When the landslide occurred, everyone should get excited to make tourists feel the danger and proceed with emergency evacuation. To implement this plan, NATO needed his student to summon the giant demon. Homer immediately objected, believing it was too risky. She absolutely could not control it. Helpless, NATO had to temporarily suspend the plan and would try to think of another way. After informing everyone, the teacher turned around to expel her. Because NATO didn't need a useless student like her. NATO knew very well that the girl couldn't control the giant demon and was afraid of it. But what disappointed him was that Homer was still standing in place, unwilling to change. NATO knew the things she had caused in the past. Most of the friends in the class had their own issues. Nevertheless, everyone came to La Sat Academy to change something. So what did Homer come to La Sat Academy for? Homer hesitantly replied that she came to learn how to control her own blood. But now, after hearing the teacher speak, she had changed her mind and wanted to change herself. Saying this, she bit her finger and summoned the giant demon. NATO changed his mind, telling Four Eyes to continue with the plan, then directly face the demon. Although Homer couldn't control its actions, that was exactly what the teacher needed. The enraged demon continuously destroyed its surroundings, inadvertently creating an earthquake that alarmed tourists. Taking advantage of the moment when everyone was worried, the subordinates immediately shouted for people to evacuate to a safe place quickly. If anyone ran slowly and was swept away by the landslide, they'd have to bear it. Thanks to everyone's help, the plan went very smoothly. As soon as Four Eyes confirmed that all passengers had been evacuated, Nato immediately jumped down and struck his student on the nape to neutralize the demon. When receiving an apology from Homer, the teacher didn't blame her but praised the girl for doing very well, and someday someone would pull her out of the darkness. Continuing the battle, the deputy continuously created numerous cubes, forcing Jane to keep his distance. While thinking of a way to counter, Jane inadvertently jumped straight into a room built by the opponent. She mockingly said he was truly a dog in a pot, then proceeded to narrow the space. She revealed it could shrink a lot. No matter how much he struggled, the cube wouldn't break. Just stay there and enjoy the feeling of being crushed to death. Instead of panicking, Jane found this feeling surprisingly familiar. As the box grew smaller and smaller, the deputy suddenly heard the sound of blade collisions and became wary. Somehow, Jane had been able to destroy the cube, which the opponent found hard to believe. Jane recounted that in the past, he had slept in the ventilation duct of an abandoned building. Compared to that dirty and terribly smelly place, this was still much better. After Jane finished sharing his hardships, Lumia threw down the head of a monster, saying this wasn't tough enough. Lumia hated fighting small fries, so she was looking for an opponent for round 2. Just as she was about to compete with Jane, the young man suddenly noticed that the girl was dressed too revealingly. What kind of outfit was it that her chest was almost spilling out? It seemed Lumia would have to teach this sister a lesson. The deputy confidently declared she would handle both at once, then created a pile of cubes. However, before she could finish building them all, Lumia had already charged forward and kicked her chin at an incredible speed. If that young man hadn't held back, perhaps the sister would have had her head blown off already. Lumia's ability was to use anger to create many things, but the user didn't know exactly what was created. Also, the power changed according to the level of anger. The downside was that it could only be used a maximum of 3 times a day. This time, the kid created a pair of boots with the ability to increase speed, forcing the opponent to be extremely cautious. At the same time, Nato summoned countless archers to fire intensively at the wall, causing the entire headquarters to shake violently. Not only Lumia but even those inside the clinic could feel it. Before the base collapsed, Nato told his subordinates to prioritize rescuing teammates and quickly leave this place. While Kiri was still trying to grasp the situation, his junior had already been surrounded by everyone. Lumia, visibly annoyed, told the teacher not to interfere, but he didn't care. Nato advised the deputy to obediently surrender. Despite being at a disadvantage, the stubborn sister refused to surrender because there were a bunch of demons in front of her. Saying this, she took off her jacket and clearly declared that she existed to eliminate demons. Today, everyone would die right here. After struggling, Shiki finally escaped the control zone that Guy had built. Taking advantage of the moment before he attacked, he immediately created a democracy gun to attack. But no matter how powerful it was, it had no effect against the gravity defense wall. Seeing that the blue-haired boy had no strength left to move, Kiri controlled the corpse to increase the weight of oxygen in his palm by 100 times. It looked like an iron ball on a crane, but this was a bit different. Saying this, he threw it straight at Shiki and said that the shock from hundreds of tons compressed would concentrate on the spot hit. This meant that both internal organs and bones would be accelerated and crushed from within. Seeing the protagonist writhing in pain, Kiri felt extremely disappointed. How could this child be the son of the demon god? Long ago, there was a notorious demon general praised as the strongest demon in history. Shiki was confirmed by the organization to be the one carrying the blood of the demon god, or also known as the child of the demon god. In the garden, the little girl couldn't stop trembling as the base began to show signs of violent shaking. Earlier, when Shiki had said, "If you still want to live, then cheer for me from the bottom of your heart, okay? I definitely won't surrender because that's the belief I just came up with." Though still fearful deep inside, the little girl decided to go find the protagonist. At the hero headquarters, the scarred old man was welcomed by many people, including a rookie who had just been transferred. The girl didn't hesitate to express her honor and asked a bunch of questions, but was ignored. When buying water, she curiously asked, "Sir, do you know about the child of the demon god that everyone is talking about?" The old man recounted that in the past, there was a demon that had almost swept away the entire hero organization. Legend had it that the demon god had impregnated many women, and they gave birth to children carrying his power. Children of the demon god were everywhere, but not every child inherited his power. More precisely, most didn't inherit it. But there was something strange: they would know when a child of the demon god was born. Suddenly, a brother appeared explaining that only when heroes overpowered demons would children carrying the demon god's power be born. By the way, this is Shinya, the leader of Team 21. After intimidating, he raised his head and asked if she knew why the 1,000-year war between the two sides still hadn't ended. The rookie stammered, not having time to answer before being mercilessly cursed by the brother. According to what Shinya knew, the first demon god also suddenly appeared when the ancestor of heroes almost exterminated all demons. Children carrying the demon god's power would appear at such times, so the war still hadn't ended. If they hadn't appeared, demons would have been cleared out long ago. Moreover, they had learned to live disguised among humans. When fighting them, there would inevitably be involvement. The erasure of those traces was all done by politicians related to heroes. Because of this, politicians would demand all sorts of things like medicine made from demon blood. If demons didn't blend in with humans, those groups wouldn't have the opportunity to exploit. Annoyed at being interrupted by the scarred old man, the rookie suddenly asked, "Aren't these collaborations all for the sake of protecting humans?" Shinya angrily cursed that politicians helped them so that when necessary, they would be prioritized for protection. To put it bluntly, those guys weren't good at all. When he learned that the old man had been hit by Shiki's technique and had to wear a prosthetic arm, Shinya approached to console in a sarcastic tone and advised him to become a teacher. The scarred old man firmly said that he would eliminate Shiki with his own hands, so he didn't need to interfere. The young man was curious to know if he would avenge the wound or resolve past matters, then left. By the way, the old man added that 8 children of the demon god were born each time. Shiki was one of them, so the organization had to prioritize eliminating him as soon as possible. But Kiri was different. He wanted to research to understand the enemy. That's why he had spared Shiki to capture him alive for experiments. The protagonist stood up and said that he didn't care about the demon god or whatever. Right now, he just wanted to make him pay for everything. With those words, Shiki took out his gun and fired repeatedly, but didn't hit a single shot. Moreover, he was dizzy from consuming too much blood, so his body couldn't move. Seeing that this place was about to collapse, Kiri once again used his comrade's power to control. When he finished dealing with him, he would also eliminate the little girl hiding over there, causing Shiki to freeze. Ignoring the warnings, the little girl walked out and asked, "Did you do this to my parents? My family didn't harm anyone. Why did you kill them?" Kiri mockingly said. "Demons playing family. It gives me goosebumps." When Shiki mentioned his name, he finally remembered the little girl had a father with a ponytail and straw hat. Before taking action, both had knelt down and begged him to spare their daughter. It looked really funny. That's why he had intentionally let the kid escape. After the couple finished pleading, Kiri had given a sinister smile, saying he would kill her in a similar way, causing both to despair. He had even whispered in their ear, "Just try to imagine your child's expression before she dies." Hearing this, the little girl burst into tears at his cruelty. Shiki struggled to his feet, telling the child not to cry to entertain that scumbag. "Wait for me to defeat this guy, and then I'll cry with you. So don't sit there crying alone." Shiki tightened his shirt, asserting that he had a heart, so he could feel pain like humans. Actually, he had wanted to turn his back on the little girl's despair, because he understood very well how painful it was to lose loved one. If you can't understand that, then you are the real demons. Kiri frowned, declaring, "If you're a demon, don't pretend to talk about human rights." He ruthlessly increased the pressure in the air and told Shiki to stay there and watch the scene of the little girl being crushed. Previously, the protagonist had deeply regretted not being able to protect his old man at that time. Was he going to be helpless like that again now? Witnessing the opponent about to harm the little girl, Shiki, with the little strength he had left, continuously sought power to protect what he wanted. With just a drop of blood from his fingertip, the protagonist's entire body suddenly burst into fierce flames before Kiri's eyes. Each child of the demon god had their own attributes. Their characteristic was that each would inherit one of these 8 attributes. Shiki possessed the fire attribute, so he was called the flame demon. Although he still didn't understand anything, Shiki knew he could fight with this. He stood up, challenging and denying everything that Bastard said. Just by looking, Kiri knew it was extremely troublesome. He had to quickly defeat it before it recovered. However, before he could strike, his arm was already burned by the flame. The blonde panicked, took off his cloak, and wondered where this source of power came from. With just a little blood to be this strong was too dangerous. Though strong, Shiki's body had also reached its limit. Even though the demon god's power had awakened, his body was still seriously injured and depleted of blood, so he couldn't control the flame. Taking advantage of this weakness, Kiri immediately increased gravity to suppress Shiki to the floor. Of course, he didn't forget to curse the harmful worms that could only live in darkness. Shiki continuously questioned what the girl's family had done wrong to suffer such a fate. Just because they were demons, they had to live such a painful life. Being a demon, couldn't they pursue happiness? Previously, the little girl had asked her mother why they weren't allowed to live happily. And then her father had answered that no creature was not allowed to live happily. So when she heard Shiki say that she could live with a smile and do what she wanted, the little girl couldn't hold back her tears. Kiri angrily declared that he would crush their future with his strongest attack. In his anger, he created a giant gravity ball to erase everything. Despite his body suffering many injuries, Shiki still tried to create one final cannon. He raised the gun and shouted loudly, "Your life from now on will become more beautiful. I will cheer for your future." Actually, during the camping trip, her parents had also said that in the future, she would meet many people, and among them, there would definitely be someone who would cheer for her happiness. With strong belief, the little girl had put all her strength into cheering for the big brother. When those words of encouragement reached Shiki's ears, he smirked and burst into flames again, stunning the opponent. Somehow, his flame not only resisted, but also caused the gravity ball to crack. Shiki smiled. "Thank you for keeping your promise and cheering for me." Saying this, he immediately fired to completely destroy Kiri's technique. At the same time, he made him experience the pain of being burned alive under the heat of the smoldering flame. After being hit by the flame, Kiri still tried to crawl to his fallen comrade. Actually, before, he was a researcher who didn't care about the death of others. He even found dissecting demons very pleasurable. While Kiri was enjoying his life, suddenly a team leader came to recruit him. Although he had refused, the young man was still assigned to that leader's team by the organization. After working together for some time, Kiri found the senior to be a generous and enthusiastic person, who even prayed for the demons he killed. He couldn't understand this because his parents had died early, so Kiri knew nothing about warmth and didn't have a burning flame to hunt enemies. When his parents died, he just thought that was something to accept. After that conversation about family, the senior decided to bring Kiri home for a meal. After such occasions, he began to feel that life was as complex as a maze. Because humans have the ability to communicate, life becomes a complex maze. However, after tasting a piece of fish, Kiri somewhat felt the taste of a meal he had long forgotten. There was once when the little brother wondered if he wasn't afraid his family would become a weakness. The senior just smiled and answered that they were the reason for him to have the motivation to survive and return. One day, when entering a house where demons lived, the senior suddenly saw his daughter's image through a demon, so he let it escape. As a result, it went berserk and turned the surrounding area into a sea of blood. When he arrived, the brother witnessed the demon rushing to take the lives of his family. After eliminating it, the dying senior admitted that he was wrong. Having sympathy for demons was a mistake. If he had been more ruthless with them, his family wouldn't have had to die. Demons must be eliminated completely, even children shouldn't be spared. Saying this, the senior asked Kiri to use his body to continue the unfinished work. Thanks to that, he didn't need much time to climb up to the position of team leader. Until now, though severely injured, Kiri still believed that everything wasn't over yet. With these very hands, he would definitely erase the regrets of his brother. As long as demons existed, they would continue fighting together. However, when seeing the senior's body burning in flames, Kiri lost his will and gave up. On the other side, Shiki quickly realized that this place was about to collapse, and they must quickly leave. But just as he moved a step, the young man officially collapsed due to exhaustion. At the tunnel, the group was completely helpless in finding a way to destroy the cube. But she no longer had the strength to seal the walls, so they just let it be. This place was about to collapse, so they needed to prioritize saving people inside. Together with NATO, everyone returned to the clinic and discovered that the doctor was still alive. Telling the story, they learned that earlier he had nearly died after having his carotid artery cut. While dying, he had drunk a few drops of blood dripping from above to revive. Then he secretly came here to treat everyone and carried out emergency evacuation. Before taking action, NATO approached and asked how Shiki's demon god power was. Kiri didn't hold back praise, saying it was extremely wonderful. But to him, it was more like a flame burning life itself. Jane wondered about the power of the demon god, but now wasn't the time to explain. They had to quickly leave before this place collapsed. A moment later, the deputy returned and discovered that her senior had passed away. After the senior's departure, Kiri had gotten married and decided to quit smoking. Although many people called him eccentric, he still pursued this work until the end and lived until the age of 31. When Shiki woke up, the doctor informed that they were at an inn run by demons. It was currently 5 a.m., so other students were still sleeping in their rooms. NATO came over with a glass of water, praising his student for doing well. Though victorious, Shiki wasn't happy knowing that the little girl's parents couldn't return. Not to mention their side had also suffered many losses. Though heartbroken, they still had to move forward. After preaching, NATO opened the window and told Shiki to be happy for surviving to see the sunrise. Before returning to school, the protagonist hoped next time they would visit normally, rather than fighting every time, which could cost them their lives. After some consideration, the little girl mustered all her courage to express her deepest gratitude to Shiki. The big brother smiled brightly, promising to meet her next time, then returned to school with everyone. Back in the lecture hall, NATO continued to provide more knowledge to the students. The demon organization was divided into combat teams, scout teams, and medical teams. After graduation, they would join one of these. Suddenly, Nato noticed that this class had quite a few unstable elements. Except for Jane and the serious ones, the rest were all doing their own thing. Instead of scolding, the teacher slowly went over and snapped his fingers, making Lumia dizzy. During homeroom, Nato stood in the middle of the class and said they would be dividing dormitory rooms. 2 people would share a room, so they should quickly pair up. While the class was discussing, suddenly Karma raised his hand and asked, "What about the extra person?" When Nato said he would share with that person, everyone immediately realized someone would have to live in a special prison when sharing with him. Nato encouraged the kids to stay with him to enjoy privileges. If in danger, he would help rescue them and could also advise on many matters. Kuna bluntly refused that fatty offer because she was busy taking care of her boyfriend. Karma and his friends, hearing this, were dumbfounded and asked how far the relationship between the two had progressed. Shiki curiously went down to ask what taking care meant, and she replied it meant teaching spelling from morning till night. His mouth suddenly felt bitter. Even Lumia slammed the table, voicing objection to boys and girls living together in one room. At least wait until 20 years old. These tofu brain kids, indeed, street thugs specializing in preaching morality. When asked for her opinion, Homer seemed embarrassed and picked up her bag to leave. Everyone just let her go. Give her a cardboard box to sleep outside would do. After discussion, the male group suddenly discovered that Jane wanted to be alone. Though in agreement, Lumia still didn't like staying with other boys. Seeing Karma being left out, Silverhair immediately suggested staying together because that girl was too dangerous. The friend heard this and felt offended, asking, "What are you trying to boast about?" Going around in circles, he still ended up with Kuna. It was truly unfortunate. On the other side, Shiki strongly opposed sharing a room with the teacher. Mentioning school, he suddenly realized that most people here had never been to school before. It seemed everyone had their own circumstances. Discussing back and forth without resolving anything, Shiki suggested playing rock, paper, scissors to decide quickly. And right in the first round, everyone was paired up except for Karma. Meanwhile, Shiki was rejoicing when he suddenly discovered he was sharing a room with Jane. Staying with this guy wasn't fun at all. How unlucky could he be? After hearing the doctor say, "Child of the demon god," Jane had turned his face away and said not to be self-satisfied. While everyone was chatting, Shiki silently thought the little girl must be trying hard. Because of hope for her future, she had decided to live fully for the present. He also had to strive for the future. At the hero headquarters, Shinya smirked knowing the time was ripe. It seemed this was a good opportunity for him to overtake that old man. Shinya didn't care about authority issues because now was the most appropriate time for him to take the head of that kid Shiki. On a day when rain poured heavily, Nato never expected his students would suffer such a tragic fate. Rewinding to a few hours earlier, while the girls were taking a bath, the boys were all exhausted after being tortured by the teacher. While complaining, suddenly Jane left the bathtub because Shiki was too noisy. Lumia stood up and advised Shiki to lower his volume a bit so everyone could relax. Only Karma didn't seem to complain at all. Indeed, he was a good person, while Ken didn't dare to go outside because he would definitely be caught by Kuna and cared for down to the teeth. Seeing the other two not believing, the young man hurriedly stood up to explain it wasn't what they thought. Just as he finished speaking, everyone was shocked to learn that his friend had invaded the bathroom to bathe with Ken. Karma was dreaming about bathing with girls when the teacher opened the door and announced there would be an evacuation drill later. Everyone should gather at the sports hall within 10 minutes. After all the students were present, Nato complained they were too slow. If he had known, he would have made everyone train outside in the storm. Although there was a big storm sweeping through outside, Nato didn't show any nervousness. Lasat Academy wasn't weak enough to have its roof blown off by a storm. The teacher wanted his students to know that in sudden situations, without unity, any individual or team would be useless, so he had decided to organize this training. Until there were instructions, everyone should wait in the sports hall. Saying this, Nato immediately went to patrol the campus and told the kids to have dinner first. Everyone sighed and wondered what he meant. Perhaps teacher Nato was deliberately setting a trap for them. After some debate, all attention of the class was focused on the pot over there. Shiki hypothesized that if they opened it, they would suffer a tremendous explosion. So the safest way to open the lid was to shoot it from afar. Just kidding a bit to create an atmosphere, but Lumia pushed his hand away and cursed. The two were arguing heatedly when suddenly Homer knelt down and apologized, making both lose interest. Kuna, afraid her lover would be hungry, told Ken to just sit and wait. As she thought, inside was normal curry, but the others were exaggerating. During the meal, Lumia kept mocking while eating, making Shiki visibly annoyed. The slippery young man shifted the responsibility to Jane, making such a serious face as if there was a bomb inside. Jane lowered his face and explained. To put it simply, Shiki was picky about vegetables, so he always wanted to get rid of them from his meals. Homer's favorite dish was stir-fried bean sprouts, but she didn't want to use leftovers from boys, so she had to regretfully decline. While hesitating whether to mix vegetables into the curry, suddenly Shiki discovered Lumia was gobbling everything up. Although Jane had a prickly exterior, he was someone who didn't like spicy food, so he wasn't as greedy as those two. Ken was someone who ate just enough because eating too much made him uncomfortable. Besides, he preferred eating pudding for dessert. Hearing this, Kuna became jealous and asked between her and pudding, which did he like more. The type of lover she liked was useless guys like him. So as long as the kid was willing to respond to her feelings, she was ready to make a whole bucket of pudding. While eating dessert, Homer suddenly spoke up and asked if anyone hadn't eaten pudding yet. Most people already had their share. Ken even had 2 jars. Kuna gave hers to her lover and didn't need it, so she declined. Jane's eyes lit up as he volunteered to finish the remaining jar, but was unexpectedly snatched by Shiki. Seeing Jane just withdrew his hand, the protagonist turned and asked if he was still hungry. Next time, if not full, remember to say earlier. Fortunately, he had saved a last portion of curry, thinking their friendship would become closer. Unexpectedly, Jane flatly refused. While patrolling, Nato suddenly received a message from the principal. Because the phone couldn't get a signal, he could only communicate through the little rabbit. The principal hoped Nato wouldn't be too strict. Why don't you be more cheerful with the students? He hoped the children would become closer to each other because demons could be stronger thanks to having comrades. Each of them carried some burden when coming to this academy. So Nato thought the kids weren't carefree enough to play with friends. What the teacher said wasn't wrong, but the principal still wanted to help the children become a united group. Back at the sports hall, 2 young troublemakers, just because of a small misunderstanding, made a mountain out of a molehill. Instead of yielding to each other, both chose violence to resolve the issue. While the others stood outside observing the fight, they had barely swung at each other, not even breaking a sweat, when the teacher opened the door and asked what they were doing. Instead of admitting his behavior, Jane pointed and blamed Shiki. Though not clear about what was right or wrong, they had eaten all of the teacher's portion. Hearing this, Homer immediately bowed her head to the ground and confessed that she was the one who ate all the bean sprouts, while the others thought since the teacher hadn't said anything in advance, they had accidentally eaten everything. Nato sighed, told Homer to raise her head, and acknowledged that the whole class was right. Saying this, Nato made the entire class stay here until tomorrow morning, as well as strictly prohibiting any fighting behavior and destruction of facilities. Anyone who left without permission would be expelled. Until he left the room, Homer suddenly remembered she forgot to give the teacher a spoon. Kuna waved her hand and told her friend to just ignore it because leaving here would result in expulsion. Just eat, fill up, and go to sleep. Why bother with such busybody matters? Before crawling into the sleeping bag, Shiki called Jane to sleep together for a bit of team spirit, but was rejected. Contrary to everyone's carefree attitude, Karma felt there was something wrong with this training. Tonight, boys and girls would sleep together, so he just wanted everyone to believe he had no dark intentions at all. Silver-haired Ken raised his hand and suggested boys and girls should sleep separately to avoid being squeezed dry by that girl. Although always talking big, Lumia was the purest one and hated inappropriate things. Fortunately, thanks to Shiki standing up to separate boys and girls into different areas, things fell into place. Although the whole group didn't get along very well, everyone wanted to enjoy the feeling of camping. It wasn't often that the boys gathered, so they wanted to take this opportunity to tell ghost stories. Shiki visibly trembled, trying to change the subject, when suddenly those 2 jumped up demanding to join. Even Jane, though unwilling, still had to reluctantly sit up and listen. Shiki made an excuse that the masked guy looked scared, so maybe they should skip the ghost stories. Unexpectedly, he clearly stated, "I'm not afraid," making everything chaotic. Meanwhile, Nato was talking with the doctor after a period of not being able to contact him, thinking he had been blocked. After chatting, the doctor curiously asked if his friend was being too strict with the children. Nato squeezed a pastry and replied that he had held back so they wouldn't be too injured. Though it sounded harsh, the doctor thought the kids understood his kindness. Besides, those children already knew what real fear was. After Silverhair finished his story, Shiki tried to appear strong, despite his inner self screaming. Seeing these stories weren't scary enough, Karma told everyone about strange incidents when staying with the teacher. Teacher Nato was hardly in the room, so the young man was often alone. Yet every time he turned off the lights to sleep, Karma would hear strange footsteps. After hearing this, the 3 boys began to turn pale but still tried to appear brave. When it was Lumia's turn, the young man boldly declared his story was the best, leaving Shiki stunned. Back then, Lumia had a friend who loved to go on night trips. On the mountain pass he often crossed, there was a sign: if you heard a woman's voice, you absolutely must not turn around. Just as the story was reaching its climax, suddenly the light went out, making Shiki scream. When the light came back on, and they asked who did it, everyone pretended not to know. Suddenly, Jane spoke up saying it seemed the rumors were true. Whenever someone tells ghost stories, ghosts would gather there. Saying this, the masked guy pointed and said it was standing over there. Seeing this, the group huddled together for comfort, except for Lumia. This was his first time seeing a ghost, so he wanted to catch it and take a look. Unexpectedly, before he could touch it, he was blown away by a defensive layer. Jane was curious to see how strong it was, but the others kept clinging to his legs. The two girls heard the noise and came out to complain. In a panic, Shiki had inadvertently created a gun and blown away the entire sports hall, to the principal's surprise. Though not violent, he still couldn't control his power. After evaluating, the principal asked Nato to tell the children that it was all just a strange dream. After all, everyone had some secrets. Sitting in the lecture hall after a sleepless night due to the principal's prank, teacher Nato suddenly walked into the class and announced that the location for their field trip would be Tokyo, making everyone perk up. Shiki was complaining because they weren't allowed to go shopping when the teacher approached and asked, "Do you think we came here to play?" The kid turned around, demanding some fun wouldn't hurt. But Nato wouldn't permit it. To avoid being discovered, the whole class had to disguise themselves and use fake names. Most people changed, only Karma remained the same. After taking attendance, Nato told the class to return to the hotel and rest for tomorrow's fieldwork. Then he held out a form and instructed Shiki to go there for a blood sample after the fieldwork. In short, they needed to check Shiki's blood, just that. On the way, Shiki happened to discover a festival being held nearby. Since there was nothing to do back at the hotel, he might as well sneak out and have a bit of fun. At a booth, Shiki saw two children having trouble winning first prize, so he volunteered to help. Noticing the owner mocking him, he picked up a gun, aimed, and confidently shot the number one target simultaneously with a friend standing right next to him. They glanced at each other, smiled, and continued to raise their guns and fire. Watching the two of them sweep through all the prizes on the counter, people couldn't help but be impressed. Were these two planning to bankrupt the owner? After perfectly handling all the targets, the two arrogantly cleaned out all the gifts without mercy. But instead of taking everything home, the two brothers decided to stay and give the toys to the children. Only the owner was depressed because he was shot at without missing a single shot. After giving away all the toys, the long-haired friend invited Shiki to a nearby park for drinks to get acquainted. The protagonist happily accepted and complimented the opponent on his excellent play. Longhair admitted he really liked it, even spending dozens of hours grinding shooting games. Shiki was visibly pleased, not expecting the other to share his interest. This was the first time he'd met someone with the same passion. Then they got to know each other. Longhair didn't hesitate to introduce himself as Mikado. Suddenly remembering the teacher's instructions, Shiki made up a fake name just to be safe. After talking for a while, he learned that the other was older than him. Besides, he was also an undercover cop who patrolled at night. Mikado shared that he became a policeman because he wanted to protect people from bad guys, and to be honest, this job was quite tough. Like that guy over there, he might seem unapproachable, but he was very good with kids. What he meant was don't judge a book by its cover. In general, Mikado wanted to see and determine good and bad based on the law himself. Unfortunately, his boss was the type who only focused on promotion. Though the core was similar, their perspectives were very different. Shiki frowned, comparing his boss to his homeroom teacher. He thought one should just be themselves and not change because of what others say. Even he preferred Mikado's way of thinking more. Mikado chuckled and praised him for being great. Saying this, he stood up and asked for contact information to possibly hang out. Shiki took out his phone, scanned the code, and said he lived far uptown. Remembering that the teacher had instructed him to get blood taken after the fieldwork, Shiki invited the brother to go somewhere to play tomorrow afternoon and received approval. After making plans, the two clinked their water bottles and agreed to meet again tomorrow. Returning to the hotel, Nato instructed the kids not to go outside until tomorrow's practice. Kuna grumbled if the teacher really intended for them to eat boxed meals. Lumia spoke up, saying having food to eat was already fortunate. Stop being demanding. Nato told everyone to go into their rooms and rest first, then turned away to find Shiki. Waiting until the subordinate was present, Shinya sarcastically criticized, going off alone to find Shiki again? Have some sense of being a deputy. Mikado bowed his head, apologizing for acting on his own, but didn't feel sad at all. Because of this, the two had found a friend who could become a soulmate. The next morning, Nato led the whole class to an old bookstore and told the kids to go inside. Don't ask. Anyone who disappears on their own like someone, don't blame him. After warning the protagonist, the teacher went in to get a few books. At the checkout counter, the staff member quickly recognized this was Nato's group. He told the kids to stand still and listen to avoid being suspected by passersby. Kyoto headquarters was a special place with a long history, covering a large area. On his side, everyone went out to scout, so a space like this was enough. It might not look like it, but they also hid important mechanisms and information underground. Shiki was excited, thinking the whole class would get to tour, but that wasn't the case. The staff member introduced himself as a member of the reconnaissance team. The protagonist was curious to know if he could join the combat team, but was shouted at by the teacher. The staff member chuckled and explained that the combat team would confront the hero organization on the front lines. The medical team not only treated those injured in combat, but also had to examine demons living in hiding. And the job of the reconnaissance team was to operate secretly. While undetected by the enemy, they would gather information, monitor, and communicate. After hearing this, everyone wondered which team to choose. Karma pondered why they didn't need to take notes. He asked back, "Can you open a notebook in front of the enemy?" Taking notes was very important. But in the reconnaissance team, most information would be stored in the head. If it was information worth risking one's life to obtain, then it was even more necessary. Now they understood why he didn't tell the kids about hiding places here, right? If someone were captured and tortured, it would be troublesome. Shiki had a commendable spirit, but he still didn't trust him. They should remember that heroes had types of abilities similar to demons, even very terrifying ones. That was without mentioning those who possessed the ability to read others' thoughts. If that ability were real, the demon side would be in big trouble. In short, information was very important, so they couldn't take it lightly. After that conversation, Shiki began to be overtly cautious to the point of being suspicious. Following his friend's advice, he tried to act as normal as possible, but unexpectedly slipped and fell face first. Then he was stepped on the hand by Jane, which was quite painful. Seeing this wasn't good, Nato turned back and told the whole class to stop being chaotic. Most security cameras in the city were linked to the hero organization. If blood was used, it would catch the reaction and send it to them. After hearing this, everyone felt more insecure knowing they were being monitored. As Kuna stated, they were just being monitored. If they paid attention, there were quite a few demons hiding in the city. Supporting them was also the mission of the demon organization. After reassuring them, Nato urged the class to continue the fieldwork. After the lesson ended, the teacher was surprised that the kids were already discouraged. Tomorrow, everyone would be free to go on fieldwork on their own, so being so gloomy wasn't good. After instructing, Nato told the protagonist to hurry and get his blood taken. After following directions for a while, Shiki arrived at an apartment building where a sister dressed extremely revealingly looked at the little guy blushing with embarrassment and found it cute. It turned out that children of the demon god were quite adorable too. After taking blood, the sister noticed he kept curiously eyeing her goods, so she decided to lift her shirt for him to see. The young man's face was as flushed as a tomato having just witnessed a sweet papaya, wanting to take a bite. She even pressed closer and asked if he wanted her to deflower him, making the little guy fall on his butt. Shiki panicked, quickly asking permission to leave early, making the sister lose interest in talking. Actually, the sister was doing this just so he could enjoy a little, knowing that kids like him had shorter lifespans than others. Maybe before they even knew what women tasted like, they'd already be in the grave. At the meeting place, Mikado worriedly asked if the kid was okay, why his face looked so dazed. Shiki responded blankly and invited the brother to see a movie. Fortunately, there was a gun movie showing today, so it seemed they were lucky. After watching, the young man sat crying, unable to believe the movie was so sad. Friends having to massacre each other was truly sad. Suddenly, Mikado put down his cup and asked, "Supposing we meet on opposite sides of the battlefield, what would you do?" Shiki thought, if it were him, he wouldn't let anyone die. He would go to the war's leader to end it. But if among them there was someone unforgivable, Shiki would deal with that person. While chatting, suddenly Mikado got an urgent call from his boss. After he left, it was Shiki's turn to receive a call from his teacher. On the way back to the hotel, Jane happened to discover a driver falling asleep. To rescue two children, he shot a small saw blade at the tire to make it veer off course. As a result, the car lost control and collapsed onto the road, and one child was injured. Jane was worried and about to run out to help when the teacher gripped his shoulder, telling the student to quickly leave. It seemed they had been recorded by surveillance cameras. Through the footage, the hero organization quickly sent location information and images to members nearby. Jane's impulsive action inadvertently pushed the whole class into a dangerous situation. Back at the hotel, Nato gave the kids 40 seconds to pack their luggage to move to another location immediately. At the bookstore, the staff member called the teacher to lead the whole class to a hiding place. He would send someone to pick them up, so please quickly prepare. After watching the video, Shinya thought the demon probably wasn't Shiki. It was simply a fool using blood in the middle of the city. Nevertheless, they still had to capture him to try to extract information. If he couldn't be used, then eliminate him and find another. After watching, Mikado smirked, asking his brother not to kill this demon because it had acted to save children. Demons who harm humans must be dealt with. But he wouldn't eliminate those who saved people. He would never go against the principles he had set for himself. Shinya was visibly angry but didn't dare to refute anything. He crushed an ant and told his brother to try to complete the mission. Shinya really hated Mikado's ideals, but still needed his strength to defeat the child of the demon god. Under the dark sewer cover was the hiding bunker of the reconnaissance team to directly share information as well as store secret information. The old bookstore was a place to blend into everyday life to collect information. There were also many other places like this to misdirect enemies. After explaining, the staff member turned to announce that they had sent another team member to pick up Shiki. Nato apologized for the trouble and planned to return to the academy as soon as possible. Everyone seemed pleased. Only Lumia was upset because they hadn't done anything yet and were being sent back. Already feeling angry inside, she was also being bad-mouthed by a group of seniors right in front of her, making the situation more tense. In that stifling atmosphere, Shiki returned and excitedly praised Jane for being so cool. The staff member chuckled, praising Shiki for his carefree statement, and the young man also thanked him, truly incurably naive. On the other side, Nato commented that Jane's action wasn't wrong but wasn't right either. From now on, train your skills more so next time you can handle it without having to use blood. Though not scolded, Jane still blamed himself for not saving that child. Shiki wondered and was about to ask more but was sent to bed by the teacher. That night, Jane couldn't fall asleep because he was still haunted by what happened earlier. The crying sound of that little girl was still deeply imprinted in his mind. After some consideration, Jane decided to do something to ease his conscience. At the same time, Shinya came to a bar to discuss business. Seeing his brother stubbornly not listening, he poured a cold glass of water on his head, then smirked and asked, "Thanks to whom can they drink good wine and party? Don't make me say it twice, understood?" After disciplining his brother, Shinya ordered him to go find the guy in the film. Before leaving, Shinya poured expensive wine and told everyone to take a sip for promotion. The subordinates didn't bother to drink and had no idea what Shinya was plotting. Thanks to him, the gang had grown to its current size. For some reason, the boss always saw through everyone in the gang. All this time, the subordinates had been skeptical, but didn't know about Shinya's ability. Although sitting alone in the bar, he could still see everything, because he carried a type of ability to spy on the vision of those who absorbed his bacteria. It was effective for 24 hours and could see the vision of 36 people at once. Through the vision of his subordinates, Shinya quickly found the target being pursued. Instead of telling everyone to ambush that brat, he told them to take it slow and try to think of a way to ensure capturing the target. After careful examination, he called to tell his brother to sneak into the hospital. By doing so, Shinya had set a trap and calmly waited for the prey to arrive to catch it. As he had predicted, Jane had come to the hospital to check on the little girl who had just been brought here. Since visiting hours were over, he could only stand outside at the counter talking to the night shift staff. Just as Jane turned away, the lady informed him that the little girl was only admitted for a checkup. The girl had been hit on the head from shielding her younger sister, but was generally okay. Seeing that relieved face, the lady had inadvertently fallen for this boy. After hearing this, Jane felt that the big sister's action was amazing. It reminded him of his former sister. When leaving the hospital, Jane was suddenly surrounded by a group of strangers. Through their speech, he quickly realized these were just ordinary thugs. To capture Jane, the boss had used the hospitalized little girl's life as a threat. Actually, these cowards wouldn't dare do anything. They just deliberately staged this to capture him. With no choice, Jane had to fold his arms and let the group take him to their base. Just by manipulating, Shinya had obtained the target he wanted without breaking a sweat. In the torture room, he continuously asked about Shiki's whereabouts but received no answer, not even a lip movement. Even though it was just a sentence that made Shinya laugh with pleasure. Despite being tied up, Jane still calmly replied to him without a hint of fear. He couldn't believe the heroes dared to take civilians hostage. Shinya smiled and replied, "There are many crazy people in the world. Who knows what will happen to that little girl?" Indeed, heroes weren't allowed to harm civilians. But did he forget the subordinates in his hands? After taunting, Shinya ordered his brother to keep watch, then turned away. If Shiki and Nato were currently present, then this much force wouldn't be enough. Therefore, he had called Mikado to the base for a trip. Meanwhile, the class had a headache after Jane left a message and disappeared. Today, that young man looked strange. It was truly incomprehensible. It was also due to Jane's momentary action that the whole organization had fallen into a mess. If the heroes had started to act, this was very tense. Since this area was handled by a group of big shot heroes, everyone was cautious. It was difficult in many ways, so people were more tense than usual. At the base, a purple-haired guy accidentally breathed too hard and knocked over an entire tower. The young man covered his face, too tired to speak, and then continued the conversation with Mikado's group. Yomi was someone who believed in prophecies, so he was always reading trivial fortunes. Awakens was always annoyed because that guy always believed in such nonsense. Back to the main topic, Shinya raised his hand to report with a superior attitude, making the tanned man heated. Entering someone else's house and shouting so loudly, was that proper? In that fiery atmosphere, Mikado suddenly noticed that these two people's temperaments were strangely similar. They were discussing important matters, but Yomi kept prioritizing fortune-telling first to make decisions. After rolling his eyes for a while, Yomi realized that the opportunity for the next phase was coming, just as Shinya thought. By the way, he revealed to the group that they had found clues leading to the child of the demon god. To eliminate the child of the demon god, Shinya wanted to ask those people for help. Awakens flared up with killing intent and asked why they should help him achieve merit. Yomi spoke up, telling his colleague to keep a cool head, then wondered why they needed help. Wasn't Mikado in the team? The brother scratched his head and modestly replied that he was overestimating him. Mikado didn't like to get physical if he didn't know what kind of person the opponent was. Awakens advised him not to live so calculatingly, just happily kill and feel this life. Shinya was ready to meet that condition by letting the dark-skinned guy fight Nato. In return, Awakens had to help him with something. At the base, while everyone was planning a rescue, team leader Masumi came over and said the combat team wouldn't take action. Those who had acted on their own must accept the consequences themselves. Seeing Shiki trying to climb into the manhole, Masumi turned and asked the teacher if he was babysitting these rowdy kids. After investigating, the team leader had discovered 3 things. First, Nato's student had been kidnapped. Second, it was related to civilians. And finally, it wasn't done by the heroes here. In short, the kidnappers were amateur thugs. Through the way they concealed their whereabouts, Masumi thought this case must have the intervention of heroes. There was a high possibility that this was arranged by a group of heroes from another area. If the combat team went to rescue, the number of protective demons would decrease. During that time, if heroes attacked the base, they would be defeated. To put it bluntly, many demons would be eliminated. Not to mention the opponent was scum willing to involve civilians, unlike the heroes. Demons were always in a state of manpower shortage, so sending the combat team from elsewhere was impossible, according to Four Eyes. Fortunately, they had Nato, who was once the elite of Tokyo's combat team. Occasionally, Masumi still remembered the image of the teacher sweeping through hundreds of heroes with a terrifyingly extreme rain of blood. Too bad he had retired and chosen to be a teacher. That said, the enemy's lair had been identified. Now they just needed to infiltrate. Shiki clasped his hands, apologizing for misjudging and asking permission to go with them. Masumi flatly refused because the kids had no qualification. Unexpectedly, Nato spoke up, asking permission for his students to participate. As the two were arguing, Karma raised his hand and said he could scout. He didn't have fighting ability, but his power could help everyone. Suddenly, Masumi pulled his shirt and asked if that was easy to eat. Those who fought on the front lines were the reconnaissance team. The job of collecting information, just one wrong step, and you'd meet your ancestors immediately. Worst of all was having information extracted and then being eliminated. The reconnaissance team would rather die than confess. All members in the demon organization had to risk their lives. Were they ready for that? Of course, no one wanted to die, but at least the class had mentally prepared. If possible, they wanted to do what they could. Shiki was half-hearted, but still wanted to participate in this deal. With persuasion from the teacher, Masumi reluctantly agreed to let the whole class go along. After reaching an agreement, the teacher assigned Karma and Homar to the reconnaissance team. The rest were the combat team. The top priority was to rescue Jane, so try to avoid fighting as much as possible. After instructing, Nato asked everyone to prepare uniforms for promising members. Once they put it on, they should prepare mentally. Back at the base, Shinya told his brother about the demon who had sent hundreds of heroes to the scoreboard. Nato was strong but had withdrawn from the front lines. If possible, Shinya wanted Yomi's team to handle that guy, while Mikado would handle Shiki. After some consideration, Yomi agreed to take this deal. He believed in fortune-telling because there was something called luck in this world. Therefore, he wanted to use fortune-telling to get closer to the happiness he desired most. This pair, though eccentric, was certainly battle-crazed. Shinya knew this well, so he had taken the initiative to offer cooperation. He was very happy to receive agreement. But as for these fortune-telling matters, he would pass. It was because of that unapproachable nature that Awakens couldn't stand him. Mikado, being easygoing, asked his brother to try reading his fortune, and received a quite reliable prophecy. He would meet someone with whom he could bond for a long time. Suddenly, Yomi changed his expression and advised his brother to be a bit more careful. Just a little carelessness and the relationship could break. Saying this, the brother took out 2 stilts and asked Mikado if he wanted to use them for good luck. In the bathroom, Shinya called and told his subordinates to continue splashing water on Jane. Standing in front of the thug's lair, Masumi hoped Shiki would talk less. Then he told Karma to use his reconnaissance power to see how it operated. Following the senior's instructions, he proceeded to release blood reality and quickly ran into trouble due to difficulty observing. Just as Masumi thought, the kid's power still had some weaknesses. First, he couldn't move while using the technique. Second, in places with many overlapping floors, it was difficult to determine positions. In short, Karma was still green and lacked experience. Masumi knew the kids were still novices, which was why he was here. For now, they would wait for orders and observe the reconnaissance team at work. Following the team leader's orders, the staff member dripped a little blood into a vial and shook it. Through the echo from the sound of blood, he would know the building's structure and the number of people around. Simply put, it was like looking at a map. Moreover, this was a power that others could also use. The disadvantage was that processing information was extremely taxing. Because a large amount of information would flood into the brain, rookies like Shiki would suffer from information sickness. Just look at the way he was vomiting for clarity. In his experience, intelligent people could use it. Everyone thought Karma would be able to use it, but unexpectedly, he also threw up. After observation, the staff members saw that there was only the reaction of one demon in the restaurant. Besides Jane, there wasn't a soul in there. There was a high chance they had set a trap. To know the truth, the only way was to go in and check. By licking his own blood, the team leader could become invisible for 10 minutes. Not only his body but also clothes and things attached to Masumi became transparent. After causing trouble, Masumi took the opportunity to go in and check, telling everyone to wait here. Seeing Karma looking discouraged, Nato approached and advised his student not to think too much. As he said, the powers of those two were really strong, but to get to where they are today, they had worked very hard. Actually, Masumi's invisibility power initially only lasted 30 seconds. He had accumulated experience and developed his power himself, so instead of getting discouraged, he should work harder. Whether Karma's power atrophied or developed depended on him. After infiltrating inside, Masumi noticed there were many intact shoe marks. He went inside to observe and determined that these amateurs had all fled. Since there were no traps, Masumi didn't spend too much time searching. Standing in front of the room door, he shouted loudly, calling Jane and asking if there were any traps inside. The brother looked around, confirmed there weren't any, and sat waiting for everyone to come rescue. To open this thick door, Lumia created a set of sharp claws, then made a few light strokes to destroy it completely to save the trouble of thinking. Shiki didn't hold back praise, saying this technique was awesome, then ran and mocking his friend, resulting in being hit on the head by the teacher for being disorderly. As soon as he was untied, Jane immediately set off to rescue the hostage without caring about everyone else. Through his eyes, Shinya had identified the entire identity of the group. From the child of the demon god to Nato, all had been seen by him.